Afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're at. Welcome to the automated accessibility testing session, part of the 83 Center ICT accessibility webinar series. Today's session, as I said, is on automated accessibility testing, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa in just a second. But Lisa, move up to the second slide. Just a couple of reminders to see the captions. Click on the closed captioning button on the control panel. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat window, and we'll monitor those and try to answer all of them. In terms of upcoming events, watch the 83 Center Net events page. We'll send out registration links, especially for the ICT series, both on the 83 listserv and also on the ICT Community of Practice listserv. And please do complete the post-webinar survey when you receive it to let us know if there were any other issues or any other areas that you'd like us to cover. One thing I did want to mention, next week's ICT session will be next Wednesday at 2:30 Eastern instead of 1:30. And it'll be on manual accessibility testing. So with that, I think I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Marty. So like Marty said, my name is Lisa Prince. I am with a group called Oklahoma Able Tech. Hopefully you're familiar with us if you've seen any of these other presentations we've done today. I'm sorry, so far, not today. This one's happening today. Anyway, so I wanted to start off just by actually trying to get a feel for what you guys might already be using in terms of automated testing tools, just to see kind of, if you're using them or if you're not. So I don't actually have a poll added because I didn't want to add all of the testing tools that we could potentially have listed. So if you would, just please go ahead and pop in the chat which automated testing tool or tools that you actually use in your organizations. And for those of you who are putting things in the chat, you may want to switch from all panelists to all panelists and attendees so everyone can actually see your responses. We've got a couple of responses coming in so far. I'll give you guys another minute or so to think of what tools you may be using, and it's okay if none is the answer, that's fine as well. Okay. All right, well, thank you guys so much for playing. To summarize kind of what I saw here, we have somebody using Axe, somebody using SortSite, somebody using Wave, and then mention like the Microsoft Accessibility Checker, Adobe Acrobat Pro. Somebody's dabbled in Wave and Axe, and then I've got Microsoft Accessibility Checker and Acrobat as well. So you guys are all thinking through the document side as well, which is cool. Site Improve, that's one I haven't seen many people talk about, so I'm glad you guys know about that one. All right, great, thank you so much. Okay, so another thing I wanted to do was just play a quick game of true or false. And a lot of the ones that you mentioned, by the way, are on my list as well. I know, and what you guys just did illustrated that there are a ton of tools out there, and there are quite a variety of needs and uses for them. So I'm excited to get into the meat of talking about them. Okay, so let's play a little quick game of true or false. This isn't very hard, but I did want to kind of get you guys involved in thinking about some of the things that we're thinking about with automated testing tools. So the first thing is automated testing tools can catch all accessibility issues. Is this true or false? And again, go ahead and just pop your answer in the chat. Got a big all capitals, false. So I love that. Great. Yes, that's the correct answer. Everybody's saying false. Fantastic. Unless I kind of jumped the gun on giving you guys the answer to that one, but there you go. I get a little overexcited. All right, the next one is that I need to pay for all automated testing tools. True or false? Got a lot of people saying false. Excellent. And we'll make kind of a differentiation between the types that are paid and the types that aren't. But long story short, enterprise tools, enterprise testing tools, which is where we're going to focus for the first half of this, those are the ones that you're actually going to have to pay for. The rest of them are pretty much free. All right, last true or false question. All testing tools test the same things. Is this one true or false? Got a mixed bag on this one. Interesting. So I got some it depends, which I love the it depends answer. That's in the accessibility world. I see that all the time, I swear. Yeah, I got some trues, I got some falses. So this one was kind of a little bit trickier question, and there really is no necessarily right answer, but I'm going to go with false on this one, just because while they may actually be like getting at the same thing, the tests that they run are always a little bit slightly different. The way they present things are going to be slightly different. So this one was kind of a tricky question. We'll go through some of those nuances as we get through the content here today. But again, I'm going to go with false on the fact that they all test the same things, because they just, again, they're getting at the same thing. They're not going to get there the same way necessarily. Okay. Got to get my focus back in the PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay, so let's start out talking about enterprise tools. And I also wanted to make a point at this point. Some of you guys were mentioning Office and Acrobat and things like that. And while those are technically automated tools, the focus of this today is web. So I'm happy to answer questions about some of those other types of tools as well. But just want you guys to know that the ones I'm talking about primarily do apply to web accessibility at this point in this presentation. So just a heads up there. Okay, so some examples of some of the enterprise testing tools that we have available to us are things like PopeTech, or there's one from TPGI, and also PopeTech used to be called Dynalytics. So if you've heard that name, those are the same thing. They just changed, I think, to PopeTech maybe last year, a little bit before. So that one, if you've heard of Dynalytics, that's not around anymore. It's just become PopeTech. Back to the second one, we've got TPGI. They have the Accessibility Resource Center, which is ARC for short. That one is fairly newer. I think it came about a couple years ago or so. Level has had one around for a really long time. It's called Accessibility Management Platform, and that's AMP for short. And then DQ has one called Axe Monitor, and they offer some products that kind of complement Axe Monitor as well, but that's the one that we're going to kind of focus on today. Then we have Site Improve, which I know a couple of you mentioned that one. And then, oh, and thank you, John actually put in the chat, TPGI was the Paciella group. So yes, thank you, I forgot to mention that. So if you're familiar with the Paciella group, TPGI is who they used to be. They've merged a couple things and now they're TPGI. So thank you for that, John. And then the last one I wanted to mention was Tenon.io, which I think was probably one of the first ones that came about. So this is kind of a list of some of them. It's by no means comprehensive, but these are just some of the ones that we see more commonly used in the field, at least with the clients and people that we've worked with. Now, I did want to go ahead and kind of at this point pause and just kind of give you a definition of what an enterprise testing tool is. And what I'd like to summarize it as is it is a tool that can run across your whole entire website, that can check for a variety of things and kind of provide you a dashboard to let you see how your accessibility of your site progresses. So that's really the benefit that these are providing. It just gives you a lot of large scale results. And we'll talk through a little bit about what they can actually check for. And it's kind of the same for both the enterprise tool and the single page checkers. So we'll do that a little bit later. So just if you're curious about that, those answers are coming. All right, so some pros of these tools. Like I was mentioning, they really provide a dashboard to help you know what kind of issues your site has on the entire site. So they can really help you keep that pulse of your accessibility on your site. They can test, I've seen people test as often as every day to every week to every month. You may test more often if you're actually running an accessibility remediation project on your site and you want to kind of see more on the regular how your site is improving and changing. So this is kind of dependent upon the tool. They all function a little bit differently. The costs are all a little bit different for how often you can actually run these. And I will say we actually use Pope Tech at Oklahoma Able Tech, not for any reason we think it's the best or anything necessarily, but it is a little on the more affordable side. And we kind of got in with them a little bit early in the game. So we just kind of kept them around, and they let you run scans for free, basically. So once you get your pages in, it'll actually let you run them for free. So they're all going to be a little bit different, and I can't necessarily tell you the ins and outs of all of these tools because I haven't actually gotten to get my hands on all of them. So unfortunately, I may be able to answer some of your questions about the different tools, but just not all your questions, depending on what you ask and what I've actually seen. Another big pro for these tools, and this is one we've actually utilized Pope Tech for quite a bit at Able Tech, is to actually help us target our manual testing. So like Marty said, next week we'll have a whole session on manual testing, and these two do go hand in hand. So we'll actually use those big, large scale bulk results to actually figure out how we should target our testing. So whether we test a page that maybe has tons and tons of errors that we find on it, or one that has something that's unique that maybe wasn't found on any other page. Those enterprise testing tool results can actually really help us target that testing. And then, like I've kind of been mentioning, it does provide you a lot of good things about your content, I would say, too, like bulk details on what you might need to fix in your content. So for instance, if your website is missing alternative text in a lot of places, you're going to be able to pretty easily see where all those locations are with one of these enterprise testing tools. So that's a really big benefit. So some cons, we've already talked about this with our little true or false game, but these tools, unfortunately, just can't catch all the issues. They're getting better, and there is a lot that can actually be tested, and we'll cover some really interesting new data here shortly. But unfortunately, manual testing is still always going to be necessary, just because these tools, can't add that human element in any case. They are just robots after all. They can also be fairly expensive. Again, I'm not privy to the cost for each of them, but I do know that some of them are a little bit more expensive than others. And so if you're working with a smaller budget, these tools just may not be within your reach, and that's totally okay. Another big con of automated testing tools, and this one will also apply to any single page checkers that we talk about too, but they can have false positives. So one we see fairly often is a color contrast fail. So for instance, if you have a skip navigation that's only visible when someone tabs into it with the keyboard and it becomes visible on that pop-up, but when it's behind the scenes and hidden, there's actually a low color contrast caused by potentially the text being white on a white background. That's technically not an issue that we would log as a fail because it does become visible when you're actually using the keyboard to get to it. But that tool doesn't know that. So there are a lot of things that it can actually say are issues and just may not be issues at all. So that's always something to consider. Now, I think it's better to have them noted, of course, just because you can actually then go check them. So it's at least telling you, hey, there might be something here. But the different tools, depending upon their language, they may say, hey, this is an actual issue, as opposed to just saying, hey, you might want to go look at this. So there can be some confusion when it comes to those things as well. Okay, so spoiler alert. I've got the percentage there for you. So this is new data that's actually come out or recently from DQ. I think they released this as part of their own accessibility conference they did back in June called AxCon. And if any of you would like to, I think AxCon, if you go to the website for it and just put in a login and your information, you can get access to all the sessions. They ran this for free. So it was a great conference. There were a lot of really great talks. So if you want to go learn more about some more accessibility things, I would recommend going there. And I can pop a link in the chat later if I remember to. Okay, so this data was actually taken from a lot of their audits that they did for a lot of their clients. So what they do is they'll actually run their big automated tool. I think that one's called Axe Monitor. And then they'll also do manual testing for their clients. So this gave them a really great test bed of data to sift through to kind of see, well, what's our automated testing finding? What's our manual testing finding? And where do those overlap? So what they actually found is that 57.38% of of issues could be caught by their automated tool. Now, any of you who have been in the accessibility world for a little bit, you might have heard the percentage back in the day that was maybe closer to 30 to 50% of issues that automated tools can catch. So the data is kind of changing these numbers for us. And even when I started, I believe it was about 3 years ago when I fully got into web accessibility, when I started with Able Tech, that was the number I kept hearing. So this was really fascinating to me because kind of either indicates that the tools are getting better or that there's something else going on. And I think that I might have an idea of what, given some other data. So this data was presented by Tenon at CSUN back in 2019. And I know they've been doing a lot more research since then, but this was absolutely fascinating. Basically what they uncovered, and this is a more technical slide, and I'm sorry for that, I'll kind of go through and share a little bit about some of these one by one. But what they found is that out of all of the testable cases that we have within our Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is WCAG for short, those are called success criteria. So 7 out of the top 10 failing success criteria out of all of the Tenon audits that they have done are shared between automatic and manual testing. So what that means really is that the automatic testing is finding quite a bit of the same stuff manual testing is finding, which then also means that we're not really being surprised by issues that we find on the web when it comes to accessibility. So they basically are kind of starting to prove that automated testing can get you a lot of good results pretty quickly. And while it can't cover everything, it's covering a lot of what manual testing could find as well. So some of the places where it overlapped, just to kind of put these in some more plain language for you. So 1.1 non-text content, that's like text alternatives are missing. Info and relationships, 1.3.1. That one is something like maybe there's a headings like a piece of text on the page, but it's not actually marked with heading structure. Contrast being low at a minimum, that's another one we see. And in Able Tech, we see this on 99%, if not 100% of the sites that we actually test. It's a pretty common one. And then we also have resized text, and that means that there is a potential blocking potentially of somebody being able to zoom or zoom out, depending upon the settings of the page. And then link purpose and context. That one is that there's not descriptive link text. So some of these may be starting to sound familiar to you, whether or not they're stuck behind the success criteria language or not. They're pretty common. And so that's been some really interesting data. And we've actually started to use that to kind of do some more high impact testing, which I can cover later. But anyway, that was really fun and really interesting. And I think it's proving that automated testing really is some good bang for your buck. And I've got a question in the chat actually, so let me back up. So Doran is asking, is this new percentage still by volume or by success criteria? So that would actually be in DQ's terms. I don't think they did it by success criteria. I think that they did it more by their checkpoints. So that would be a different number to DQ versus what it would be to Tenon. I hope that answers your question. But I actually, see if I can get this link off real quick. Oh, my computer's not going to cooperate. That's actually a link. So I can share this slideshow with you guys, and you can go click that link and get to the data and see all of the research that they did. It's a really excellent paper that they put out on this information. Okay, great. Okay, so what does all this data mean? So that what we're kind of trying to say is that automated testing is a really important piece of your accessibility testing strategy. But again, with the cost of these tools, it just may not be within your ability to purchase one of these enterprise tools. So you can get a lot of the same results just using the single page checker. So that's where we're going to start to focus. So those enterprise tools are great, but they just aren't required. All right, so some of the benefits of single page tools. First off, I think that they really do a good job of helping bridge the gap between the tester and the code. Now, this isn't to say that this wasn't true about the enterprise level tools, but especially if you're first getting started and you don't have access to an enterprise tool, this is really one of your first methods for trying to actually start to understand accessibility without actually having to dig into the code if you're not comfortable with that. Now, if you are, that's totally fine. And there's lots of ways to look at the accessibility of a site with or without tools involved. Another great thing about most of these single page checkers is that they are mostly free. So anyone can get started using these as long as you have at least one of the browsers that one of these supports, because they all work differently in different browsers. Some single page tool examples. And you guys listed quite a few of these. So Wave, you're already familiar with, a lot of you. Axe. I don't think I saw anyone mention Arc Toolkit from TPGI. Site Improve also has a little single page checker. Google Lighthouse is one that is actually using Axe rules, just like Microsoft Accessibility Insights. And I think Microsoft Insights came about fairly recently too. It might have been 2019 or so when it was released. And it also uses Axe rules. So Axe is an open source set of testing rules. And so that's why a lot of tools actually use what they've already built. So some of the results are going to look very similar. They just may be presented very, very differently. So another thing I wanted to point out too is that all of these tools, for the most part, except maybe Google Lighthouse and Accessibility Insights, they're single page checkers that also, or the company also has an enterprise tool. So again, you're kind of getting the same results from these tools as you may from the enterprise tools, just on a single page basis. And I've always thought that was fascinating that they had both options available. So you can kind of stay in the same ecosystem if you're doing your manual testing versus your enterprise level testing. All right, so let's kind of dig into some of the commonalities between these two types of tools, the enterprise and the single page guys, and sort of see what they are capable of and what they're not. But before I do kind of go into the details of what they check for and what they don't, I wanted to talk a little bit about which ones may be better for your role. So this by no means is the end all be all, I would say. This is just kind of what I've seen in our experience working with clients that we work with at AbleTech and doing the trainings that we do on accessibility testing. And also, I wanted to point out too that these roles are pretty broadly defined. So I don't know how many of you actually identify as content managers or developers or whatever else, but content managers, what I really mean by that is somebody who, may know a little bit of code, may not, is responsible for managing website and just maybe has no idea about what goes on behind the scenes, and they're just used to using the WYSIWYG, which stands for what you see is what you get, text editor kind of situation. That's the role I'm talking about here. So what we've typically seen is that Wave or Site Improve will kind of work better for these types of people just because they don't involve a lot of code, and they also include a lot of learning resources. So if you encounter an issue, you're actually able to select a little button that'll take you out and explain what the rule means so that you can actually start to learn. So I think they're both really great learning tools. Now, Microsoft Accessibility Insights, it's a little more on the technical side with how it talks about things, but they do have some more scaled back parts of their tools that kind of help you go through some of the manual checks too. So that's why I think this one is also an important one for somebody who is maybe just getting started to look, getting started in accessibility to look at, because it could actually really help you know what you need to test for and take you through a process to kind of get that idea in your mind. And then on the developer side, so again, this is maybe people who are more comfortable with the code behind the scenes. You have Axe and Art Toolkit, Google Lighthouse, and then I kind of mentioned Microsoft Accessibility Insights here as well, just because it is a little more technical in what it actually presents, I think. I wanted to do a quick demo. Shift over. This one here. So again, I don't really have time to get too much into all of these different tools. So what I wanted to do is just show you Wave and Axe, since those are two of the most popular ones, and kind of show you the difference in how you get them started and what they actually kind of look like in terms of what they present. So what I'm using now, or what I'll be using here shortly, is the Wave toolbar. So this is actually built into my Chrome browser in the little app. I'm not sure what that's actually called, the app section. Should probably know the name of that, but it's slipping my mind right now. Anyway, so it's just a little button that we have here, and you can click it and it activates Wave and it'll just start running on your page. Now, the site that I'm on is actually, and I'll pop this in the chat if you guys are interested. Switch my chat settings. This is actually a testing site that the University of Washington has actually put up to let you, do things like test out these testing tools or help train people on how to do accessibility testing. So we use these a lot in our trainings. They have an inaccessible one and then also an accessible one, which is linked kind of somewhere on the page. Anyway, so when I run Wave, I have a little toolbar pop up for me, and it shows me a summary of the issues that it has found. If I go over to my details tab, that'll list all of my errors. And I was mentioning there's a button that you can click to actually find out more about these different issues. So for instance, if I click on the information icon next to missing alternative text, it'll take me over to the reference tab, and it'll show me what exactly that error means. And then it'll also link out to the WCAG standard itself. So you can go read the more technical stuff if you're interested in that as well. And I will say, when you're first getting started, this is really helpful because it'll show you the error. It'll help you go connect the dots between that WCAG standard, especially if you're going to do anything with WCAG instead of just using kind of a more basic checklist when you're doing testing. It can really start to help you connect the dots between the two things and get you more familiar with the more technical things without overwhelming you. So if you go one more tab over, it'll actually give you the heading structure if there is any. So this one doesn't actually have any, but welcome should be a heading, for instance. Bienvenido should be a heading. And should go from there. So it's kind of showing you, hey, there's actually no heading structure here. And then it'll also show you contrast issues. So, so this is one way of kind of going through the results, but you can also just go strictly to the page and start clicking on the icons here. So the great thing about Wave is that it does actually sort of show you visibly where things are, if it can. It's not always going to get it perfect, especially if you have a pretty complex web page, but it'll at least kind of point out, well, this is where the issue is kind of close to, at least. But anyway, if you click on each of these issues, it'll actually show you kind of a summary, and then you can click reference, and it'll take you to this little reference tab and open up the same way we did before. Or you can click code if you're interested, and it'll show you the exact line of code that has the issue. So it really gives you a lot of options for how you look at the content and how it's actually displaying the issues. Okay. Now, again, I don't have time to go through all of these or the issues or anything like that. So I apologize, but if we do have any time left over and you're interested in any more of the tools, I'm happy to show you any of the other ones you're interested in. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh and get that one gone, and then I wanted to show you Axe really quickly. So how you actually open Axe once it's installed into your browser is to right-click and go to Inspect. You can also do or hit Control-Shift-I if you're on a Mac. That should be Command-Shift-I, and it'll open your developer tools. So what this will do, it's either going to open up a pane to your right, or if you you may have your settings set to where it's at the bottom. I'm not really sure how it is by default. But it'll open up this panel, and then you have the ability to access your tools from here. So this is one of the things I see people struggle with the most, because it is just a little more technical even how you get to the tool, let alone the tool's results itself or themselves. So if I click on Axe Dev Tools, this is where the tool is located, and you have an option to scan all of the page, or if you sign up for their Pro version, which is relatively new, they just kind of released it, got it out of beta, and I can't remember how much it is, but it kind of does the same thing that I mentioned Microsoft Accessibility Insights does. It'll take you through a bunch of testing, manual testing too, like keyboard testing, and can help you sort of do a more thorough accessibility test. But unless you have that Pro version, all you can do is scan all of the page. So when I do that, it will open up the results pane, which is kind of similar to Wave and whatnot, but it just looks a little bit different, you can see. So it's going to, the issues are going to be down here. You can go through each of them one by one, and you can also turn on a highlight down here in this bottom pane that'll show where the issue actually is. So it'll actually go through and display on the page, kind of similar to Wave before, but again, you kind of have to activate it one by one. So this is just a little different in how it presents things. And again, the issues that it found are probably going to be quite similar, but they're going to find things and report things out just slightly differently. That's just a fun thing about the accessibility world. We're all kind of doing like similar goals, or going for similar goals, but just kind of getting there different ways. Okay. So just seeing those two different tools, which do you think might be the one that you might be more likely to want to use? Go ahead and write a response in the chat for me. Kind of both, yeah. Somebody saying Wave, yep. Got a meh. That's a great response. I love that. Probably not sure until I try them both. Yeah. And you don't have to make any decisions right now. I'm just kind of trying to get you to think about which one you may actually be more likely to use, because again, I'm going to reiterate the point that it's not so much important which tool you're using as long as it is a reputable tool. It's just important that you're actually going to use it and take the results that you get from it and do something with those results. So there's no wrong answer. And I like the answer of both. I actually do that in my own testing. So when we're reviewing a website, I'll actually do Axe and Wave both when I'm going through the manual piece of the text testing, just so that I can actually kind of feel like I covered more of my bases and kind of do a slight bit of comparison to make sure I'm just, being as thorough as possible. So that's not necessary to use both either, but that's just kind of going to be a preference you maybe decide on as you get more familiar with the testing tools. Okay. Let me move back over to my PowerPoint, and we will move on. All right, so some things that the tools can find, and I'm not necessarily going to go through each of these, but you can see it's quite a few things, but and this is by no means a comprehensive list either, but it can find whether or not headings are defined, skipped headings, if there's something that skips from maybe like a heading 1 to a heading 4. It can find color contrast issues on text if the background and the color of the text are not images or gradients. That's the important thing there. So it can test a lot of color contrast issues, but it's just not going to find everything potentially. Whether or not alternative text exists, and that's an important distinction, which we'll cover here in a second. Incorrect table structure. So if your table structure is missing headers, it'll be able to find that normally. Positive tab index values. And again, you don't need to know exactly what a tab index value does, but positive tab index values can mess with how a person actually tabs through the page through any interactive things such as links, buttons, anything like that. So that can typically cause an issue unless somebody's actually really considered the reason they put a positive tab index value in it. Unclear link text. We've kind of already covered that one, I think, at one point during this. Form labels that are not properly associated to their fields is another thing it can find pretty easily. A lot of the tools will find missing skip navigation links and like missing page title or language, and then landmarks, which is a whole topic into itself. It can do some things with landmarks too, or they can, sorry, not it. So what they can't find, for instance, whether or not all interactive elements can actually be used via the keyboard. Incorrect keyboard tab order. So it may be able to find that there's a positive tab index value, but it's not going to be able to tab through the page for you and actually show you whether or not that tab order is correct. Some of these tools are making it easier for you to look at the tab order. And if you want a sneak preview of that, come back to next week. So I'll give you a little bit of a teaser there, but we'll cover some of the tools that do really cool things with tab order and checking that. Whether alternative text and accessible names are meaningful. So while it can say whether or not you have alternative text on images or not, it can't check them and see if they actually make sense for that content. So it's important to get some human interaction there to make sure that those are actually accurately conveying your content. It can also not find low color contrast on text that have gradients or images, or content that's conveyed using color by itself. And then lastly, we have like lack of usability in workflows. So while it may be able to, see that your login form isn't properly created, it's not actually going to be able to test your login form and make sure that somebody can get all the way through it if they have, if they're just using keyboard or if they're using a screen reader or things like that. So that's an important thing to note. It also doesn't do a great job with like form error identification. So if you have a bunch of required fields and you hit submit and those fields are empty, it needs to let the user know which things are incorrect and how to fix them. It also needs to let the users know whether or not there's like a format required, like a date, month, dash, day, dash, year, or whatever it is. Tools can't really test that. And they also can't test, for instance, if the screen reader is not notified that there are those issues. And then a small one that we see pretty often is content that doesn't have list structure, but the tool can't tell that that's potentially going to be a list or should be a list and tell you, hey, this needs to be a list. Although, had to put a caveat in here, Wave just actually added something within the last few months that does try to test for that. So it may not catch all of them, but they're trying to see if you have letters or bullets or things that just aren't in a list structure. So tools may get better as we go along. All right, I wanted to briefly cover how we kind of use both of these types of tools in our own testing workflow at AbleTech. And you guys may be testing your own website, you may be working with clients kind of like we do, but the concepts can apply to either case. Or even if you're trying to actually implement this with developers or things as you're going along, these kinds of things can still sort of apply there too. But the first thing we do is run our enterprise tool on our site. And we'll use that to get the big picture idea of what that tool is doing. I'm sorry, what the accessibility of the site is like. And then we'll use that information to kind of help define our scope of testing. So we do not test every single page of a website. We test kind of the most important pages, the things that are pretty crucial information, like getting unemployment, for instance. That would be a pretty crucial piece of a website. We also just have a lot of conversations with the clients that we work with to see what those kinds of important content are. And then we also try to see if they can help us figure out what kind of components exist on the site. So maybe the site has a carousel, maybe it has a calendar, maybe it has a button type of thing that's used pretty commonly, or a set of accordions. So we actually don't test those more than once. So we try to just test them once and then give the feedback, you know, as for all of those things that are used across your site. So our enterprise tool really helps us kind of narrow down alongside that conversation we're having with the client. And then we start in on our manual checking process. So right now we're just using an Excel spreadsheet, and we have our big WCAG checklist, and we'll go through and test either the component or the page or the process, like that login kind of idea. And we'll use those single page testing tools as we're doing that, so that we can actually get a little faster result than having to do all of that by hand. And then we'll kind of log those results in a report and prioritize them based on how big of a barrier they may be, or if it's something that's on every single page in the website, and if we fix it with a couple lines of code, potentially, we could actually end up making a pretty big impact pretty quickly. So we might prioritize those higher. And then we'll try to use all of that information to assist the client with corrections, provide training for them, and just generally help them along the way, because we found that giving people a report, or even the ones that we try to prioritize, it's a lot sometimes. So we really try to help people along the way. But anyway, not to get too much into how we do things, but that's kind of the way we use both of those types of tools throughout our process. So some tips that I have for you guys, kind of to close out here. Always just make sure you run your tools, whether or not it's enterprise or single page checkers, just to gain what you can from those, and make sure you're actually being as efficient with your testing as you possibly can be. But just don't rely on these tools, because like we've kind of covered, they are not going to find everything. They're going to miss some things. And there's going to be some stuff that they just can't actually fundamentally understand as pieces of robot technology. Also, don't worry about choosing the best tool or anything like that. Just choose the one that you actually know you can use, that you can get a lot out of, and start there. You may want to branch out eventually and try other tools. There are new ones that come out all the time. There are also new advancements to the ones that are already in existence. So, you know, feel free to kind of change your process as you kind of go along and get more comfortable with this stuff. And then the other thing I will say too is don't use too many tools. So I say that when I first started, I was just overwhelmed by the sheer number of tools. I was overwhelmed by the fact that some of them disagreed. So I think that it's in everyone's best interest to really just pick a one or two, start there, and then, you know, like I said, adapt as you need to, as you get more comfortable with doing accessibility testing. All right, now this wasn't exactly something I felt tied into automated testing results or anything like that, but I felt like I still needed to mention it because there are a lot of really big conversations happening around overlays right now. I don't know if any of you have actually seen, there's an NBC, I think it was NBC News article that came out that was talking about these overlay companies. So it's gotten a lot of traction right now. Anyway, so these tools called accessibility overlays, they're being kind of touted as one line of code to fix all your woes. And unfortunately, you know, especially if we think back to those examples I listed of things that these tools can fix versus things that they can't, these tools, these overlay companies, they can't actually fix those things, because 90% of the list that I had about it, what it can't check, is because we have to lay human eyes on it. So alt text is a great example. You know, it may be able to add alternative text somehow, but is it going to be descriptive of the content? No, probably not. Not unless someone's actually gone in and actually added that alternative text to the image. So some examples of these tools, and the big one that's in the news lately is Accessibility, but AudioEye is another one, and there are some other tools out there as well, but those are the two I'm just most familiar with and that I've actually seen in the wild a couple of times. Another thing is, some of these tools even block the testing tools we've discussed today. I think Wave in particular was one that these tools were kind of starting to block. So you couldn't actually get a good picture of the accessibility of your site with these tools because the overlays were blocking them. So whether or not you have heard about them or thinking about using one, I just kind of wanted to mention that this is something that is really big in the industry right now. And if you want to learn more about it, there's actually a website called shouldIUseAnaccessibilityoverlay.com. And it has a ton of just resources in general, and it lists a ton of articles from experts in the field about these overlays. But to tie it kind of back to what we've talked about today, these pieces of technology are just purely using artificial intelligence, kind of similar to how our automated tools are. So again, if you can kind of make the connection, see that the testing tools that we've talked about all day long today, they can't catch everything. This can't either. So just kind of keep that in mind as you go along. All right. Again, I can either pop this link and the slide deck in the chat, or Marty, if you guys can share it, that would be great too. Just let me know whichever I need to do. But there are some resources I've listed here to kind of give you some further reading. The first link I just wanted to point out is the W3C's accessibility testing tool list. I think it's a bit outdated myself, and it's also got a ton of tools. So again, if you don't really want to be overwhelmed, or if you're worried you are going to be overwhelmed, I wouldn't go look at that necessarily. But it is there if you kind of just want to see the variety of tools that are out there. Then there's some W3C guidance on selecting tools. It's pretty good, as well as an article on from WebAIM on some basic information about evaluation testing tools. So a couple of options there. All right, so I've reached the end of my content. We have about 12 minutes for questions. So feel free to pop more questions in the chat, and I see some in the Q&A, so I'll move over there. And I'm also going to put my email address in the chat for you guys. Any of you who want to email me questions after the fact, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in there, and then we'll move over to the Q&A. Okay.
And Laura did mention that you did answer her question.
Oh, good.
So yeah.
Good. Yeah, I was just reading through it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I've got a question from Sally on what do you use to create your reports? I knew someone was going to ask this question, and I really wish I had a better answer than what we're using now, but we currently use Excel to log our issues, and then we actually take those basically tables and paste them into a Word document. So we're doing that reporting all by hand right now. We're not programmers, you know, it's just Rob Carr and me working on this stuff together. So we haven't been able to come up with something that's a little more efficient. We have looked into vendors potentially to build us kind of a manual testing tool that will sort of do what we need to do, but the cost was kind of wild, so we didn't actually get to do that. But yeah, we do use Word to do the report. So our page, I'm trying to think about some other information that might be helpful for you to know about our reports. We typically I think I did an assessment that was about 20 or so components and pages, and it ended up being about 20 pages. So we try to keep it as concise as possible, because again, when you hand over a report to somebody and it's just hundreds of pages, I think it really overwhelms them. So that's where I think it's really important to make sure that you give them a report that's A, digestible, and B, is just, or they know that you're going to kind of walk alongside them to help with the issues to make sure that they can actually get them fixed. Okay. And I think I saw some more questions coming in through the chat too. So let me. Accessibility overlays, blah, blah. Yeah, so thank you for linking to the NBC News article. I appreciate that. And then mentioning that a college student created the Chrome extension to block overlays. Yes, that's, I'm really glad that they did that. That's really neat that someone actually took the time to do that. All right. John, it sounds like you're asking suggestions for websites where there are assets embedded. like Google Docs inside web pages. Can you give me a more specific example? I think I'd better answer your question if I had a job. Okay. So while you're putting that, hopefully a little clarification there, I'm going to answer another question. Is there a full course or a certification for this work? Yes, there are a couple. So the one that I actually did was called the Web Accessibility Specialist Certification. It's from a group called IAAP. And that one, I think, was the one. They have I'm going to get the acronym wrong. It's CPAC, CPACC, Certified Professional of Accessibility Core Competencies. I think they have that as well. I have that one too. But the one for WAS, it's a little bit more technical and can help you get really good at accessibility testing. Goes over all of the Cody sort of stuff. It was really helpful for me to help frame how I do accessibility testing. The other thing that people do a lot is trusted tester, and that's through the government basically. So that's a really long and in-depth process, but you come out of it with a certification from that one as well. And let's see, got a question. How many customers do you have and what do you charge? We have a lot of people that ask us for somewhat basic accessibility testing. So I would say over the course of a year, we probably have, I don't know, at least 20 to 30 of those requests. As far as full-on website accessibility reviews, I'm doing about 3 a year right now. So it's not all that much. And we charge basically a small rate for overhead. It's about, well, it's less than half of what we know the big companies like Level and DQ and those kinds of people would charge. So like I said, we're just trying to cover our overhead. Let's see here. What is your opinion on the efficiency of using automated testing tools? Ooh, chat just moved on me. What is your opinion on the efficiency of, using automated testing tools for SPA web applications, Angular? As far as I know, the tools should work pretty well no matter what the framework is. I don't know if I'm super equipped to answer that question, but I haven't seen anything saying not to use those tools on something like Angular. So I think they should all work for you no matter what you're using. All right, John, thank you for clarifying. So yeah, where you have like an embedded Google document, there's a couple things to think about with that kind of case. So yeah, if the document itself isn't accessible, then there's really no chance that the embedded version of it could be, but it also really depends on how it's displayed. And I'm not sure I've actually seen this exact case where there's an embed of a Google document, so I haven't gotten to test this myself. But I haven't seen too many embedded sort of PDF viewers, for instance, or Google document viewers, and actually gotten to test them. But the ones I have, they have not been very accessible. So the whoever built the actual little plugin to embed them didn't think about accessibility, and they have no keyword accessibility. So I would say you really just need to make sure if you encounter one of those, just make sure you do the basic standard web accessibility testing. And if you can get into the document and actually it'll read through it with a screen reader, you might be okay. But the chances are kind of slim, I would say. But again, that's not having encountered too many of those myself. I've got another question about, does Wave or Axe allow you to print out their error reports, or is this what I copy paste? Wave does not let you print out error reports. So normally I'll just find an error with Wave, go kind of check it more by hand, and then just log it manually. I think Axe does let you do some sort of an export somehow, but I don't actually know how that comes out because we just don't use it. Axe Pro does let you log a little bit more, I think, so you can put notes in there, but again, that one is paid. So I know some people are probably starting to use that and just handing that off to a client, but we don't personally use that, so I can't give you much more information besides that. And someone's asking, can you hire us for testing for our clients? Yes, we do. As long as we have the capacity, we can do assessment for you. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email and we can have a conversation about it. You have had great questions. Oh, and thank you, Doran. Axe lets you print out reports only if you have Axe Pro. The free does not. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I wasn't for sure about that. I did use the Axe Pro beta before it went paid, just to kind of see. We try to keep tabs on what the tools are doing and how people may be able to use them, but I didn't get as far as that. So thank you for that. What other questions you guys have? I think I've gotten to all of them. If I haven't, let me know in the chat and I will try to go back and find them. I was trying, with the chat scrolling, it gets a little hard to keep up with the questions. I've got a question on whether or not you need to have an account in order to use the ARC toolkit. You do not. And actually, since we have some time, I'll go do a brief demo of that one too. So it works the same way as Axe does in the developer tools. So I'm going to right click and go to inspect and click on ARC toolkit. And you can run the test here. And you can see this one to me looks even a little bit more code-like than Axe in a way, but it does have some really neat functionality in it. I will say I use it for tab order sometimes. And yes, I can send a copy of the presentation, or if any of you are still around, I can see, it looks like I can add a file. Let me see if I can drop the file in here so y'all can just download it right now. Oh, it's asking me to do SharePoint or something. So, okay. Well, hopefully Marty can, do you mind sharing this slideshow after? Because it doesn't look like I can easily send it via the chat. It's asking for SharePoint or.
Yeah, we will. We'll send it to all the participants.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So y'all will get a copy of this, and it's got, like I said, the links to the DQ report that I mentioned. It's got some links to some more resources and a few other things in there for you. Yeah. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for having me here. And I got a question just now. The video will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. It will be on YouTube, right, Marty? And it's going to be shared on the.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube and on the AT3 Center website too.
I think I have that, or I thought I had that link handy, but apparently I didn't. So.
And we'll go ahead and send it to each of the participants too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your attention, and thank you so much for your questions. I really enjoyed this session, and I hope you guys got something out of it. So, like I said, feel free to contact me after if you have anything that comes up after the fact. And thank you, AT3 and Marty and everyone for having me. I really appreciate it. Well, thank y'all. Have a great day.